bodywork. Ford walks around the car, inspecting it. Then he opens the driver's side door as if to get behind the wheel.
Yo, weirdo!
Instead, he rips it off. He then walks to the passenger side and destroys that door too. Then he smashes the windshield,
Take them
stomps
out.
the fenders off, and kicks in both headlights. In shocked silence, the team watches as Henry Ford demolishes their painstakingly crafted gift. Ford is teaching them a lesson. This is his company, and the Model T is his car. A perfect car. And no one, absolutely no one, will take it away from him.
Just lay
Get on
your
the
head
ground
down
now.
and walk away.
This series on Henry Ford was chosen by our awesome patrons over on Patreon. And if you want to have a say in the historical topics that we actually make shows about, stay tuned until after the episode. To those that knew him, Ford had always had a dual nature. For instance, while he gave his son Edsel every advantage, he was also an overbearing, controlling father.
Take them
And his
down.
fearless ability to take on all comers, admired in many instances, also made him hostile, temperamental, and abusive. He also loved boyish pranks, but as he grew older, they became more mean-spirited.
Get on the
In fact, at his first
ground
car, he once hooked up a battery to a urinal so it delivered an electric shock when used. Still, employees loved him for his common touch and willingness to pitch in on the factory floor. And despite the sinister undertones of Ford inspecting workers' homes, most employees, even the journalist Ida Turner, who you can learn more about in our Teddy the Trustbuster series, praised his social programs. After all, the $5 daily wage changed their lives. In a few years, it raised the average savings of a Ford worker from $200 to $2,000 and made it possible for their children to attend school rather than work themselves. Plus, Ford's minimum wage became the standard in American manufacturing, vaulting millions to the middle class. His techniques of mass production, at the time called Fordism, also spread, lowering the cost of manufactured goods. These policies were transformative for the American workers, perhaps even more than the Model T, and Ford was celebrated as a hero for it. But in 1914, the darker side of Ford began to emerge, because he began thinking that he was in fact the lone genius that the press treated him as. Instead of just engineering and business, he assumed he could speak knowledgeably as a master of any topic, from politics to society to war
Surrender
and peace. And he forgot he hadn't done everything himself. Soon, Ford began butting heads with James Couzens, who had for years successfully reined in Ford's worst qualities and channeled his best ones. But in 1913, Ford decided that Couzens would no longer restrain his genius. He publicly contradicted and undermined Couzens in meetings, went around his back, and at one point, when Couzens asked him to sign receipts for borrowing company property, Ford instead burned them. But the break came as a result of World War I. Throughout his life, Ford was an avowed peace activist. He believed war to be wasteful and unproductive. It broke down rather than built up. The war in Europe, he said, was nothing to do with America or the average man. Was he right? Well, kinda, but he also called American soldiers lazy and insane, would later say the Lusitania's civilian victims, quote, had been born, and blamed the war on a shadowy cabal of, quote, bankers and financiers. So, yes. Then in December of 1950, he chartered a ship in a highly naive scheme to send a delegation of peace activists to neutral Norway to negotiate an end to the war. This trip was a disaster, as you can imagine, and Ford abandoned the delegation the moment they made dock. Journalists also found him shockingly ill-informed on the state of current events in the war. The last straw for Couzens was Ford using the company letterhead for these activities and trying to publish an anti-war editorial in the Ford Company newspaper. He resigned, later going on to become mayor of Detroit and a longtime U.S. senator. Meanwhile, the Dodge brothers, who were now building their own cars, mind you, and Ford's other investors had it with him. He was never supposed to be solely in charge of the company and had clearly shuffled money around to avoid paying investors. Yet it was his plan to divert $55 million of dividend payments to build a giant new plant on the Rouge River that finally pushed things too far. From the Dodge's standpoint, Ford's Model T price cuts, the $5 wage, and his aggressive expansion had come at the cost of the shareholders. They successfully sued him, forcing him to halt construction plans and pay out a $20 million dividend. Ford had enough of being controlled. For decades, he'd been resentful of his investors, men who, from his perspective, contributed nothing but money. So he formulated a plan to cut them out. In 1918, he retired, passing the presidency to Edsel, then loudly started talking to the press about forming a new company in competition with the old one. He would make a new car, he told reporters, half the price of the Model T and better engineered. Shareholders panicked, thinking Ford's new venture would put the Ford Motor Company out of business. So when purchasing agents approached them offering a good price for their Ford stock, every single investor sold, thinking the shares could only drop in value. But those agents were secretly buying on behalf of Henry and Edson. And when the deal closed, the Ford Motor Company was the largest wholly family-owned company in the world, and Ford could now do whatever he wished, including cutting out almost everyone who'd helped him form the company and make the Model T in the first place. By that time, the company was turning out anti-submarine patrol boats and aircraft engines for the war effort. Now, Ford hadn't changed his ideas about the war, but once the U.S. joined, he wasn't going to shirk his patriotic duty. While few of the boats or engines arrived in time for combat, it was still a successful test of American manufacturing's ability to pivot from civilian to defense production. Yet the end of the war brought no relief, for in 1919, Ford experienced the worst working trial of his life. See, he'd sued the Chicago Tribune for libel, after it ran an article calling him an anarchist and ignorant idealist. With the trial hanging on whether those accusations were true, Ford had to personally take a stand to refute them. Though it was immediately clear he was no anarchist, the cross-examination exposed how uninformed Ford was on the basic facts of American history and government. On the stand, he said the American Revolution took place in 1812 and identified Benedict Arnold as a famous writer. He denigrated the idea of studying history altogether, saying he was interested in the future and that readers' knowledge of the past hadn't helped prevent the Great War. So, Ford won the case. A measly 6 cents in damages, but the coverage was absolutely brutal. And Ford, who had already cut so many people out of his life, drew further inward and became angry. And one outlet for that anger was a personal column he had in the Dearborn Independent, a struggling local newspaper that he purchased. There, Ford decided his next great social crusade would be against the people he considered responsible for the start of the First World War, as well as everything else he didn't like. And now we've got to the part that the foreshadow has been warning us about. In May of 1912, Ford published the first article in a series called The International Jew, The World's Problem. In over 90 articles, based on ideas Ford expressed to the ghostwriter who actually found them, the series alleged a vast and improbable conspiracy controlling every aspect of life. According to these articles, Jewish plotters were behind everything from the First World War to the rise of square dancing and jazz music. They were behind U.S. monetary policy and ruined the sport of baseball. Not only did they supposedly control Hollywood, but also bootleg liquor and the Irish political energy of Randy Hall. And in one case, clearly still sleeping from his trial, he said they were the reason Benedict Arnold betrayed him. These articles, legitimized by Ford's signature, mind you, were incredibly dangerous, especially since every Ford dealership had to spot the Independent, giving it a national reach and eventually a circulation of 700,000, and he later published them as a 3-volume book with a slightly tweaked title, The International Jew, The World's Foremost Problem. Ford eventually withdrew the volumes and shut down the paper in 1927, after being sued for libel by a man who targeted the articles. Ford denied all knowledge of the articles, claiming someone else had written them under his name and apologized. Only after Clara threatened to divorce him, though it was already too late. The first German edition of his book had already come in 1922 and landed in the hands of a young Adolf Hitler, who saw much that he liked in Henry Ford. And as we prepare to dive further into Ford's darker aspects next week, I can't help but be reminded that we only get to talk about important and nuanced characters in history rife with controversial material like this because our wonderful patrons over on Patreon help make it all possible. Actually, they're the ones who voted for this series to get made. I'm so glad you asked. Every extra history series subject is chosen through a two-step process. First, we each writer something like the Napoleonic era or anything war. Then, patrons get to send us a bunch of topics within that theme. We look them all over, get super impressed at the creativity we all bring every single time, and then cut them down to a short list of final topics. And finally, we run a poll for our patrons to vote for their favorite, and bam! A patron-chosen series is greenlit, and 6 weeks of content is born. So if you'd like to join our Patreon community, not only will you be helping us create the content that you love, but you'll also have access to a ton of cool perks, like having your name in the credits. Or having your name in the credits next to a custom paint art portrait of your face. Or viewing all of our shows 24 hours early, or an invitation to our official Discord to chat it up. Or exclusive 4K wallpapers and never-before-seen digital posters. Or 20% off our merch store where you can see Magnus with Silly Shirt. Or and a lot more. Wait, that last part's got no way. But you get where I'm going, right? So whether you'd like to join an awesome community of feature of extra history, see your name on the little screen, or just want to make sure that you keep rating all our shows, please consider becoming a patron. Give a little love. We would very much appreciate it. Plus, you know India too. You'll be joining the splendiferous ranks of Ahmed Ziad, Turk, Angelo Valenciana, Arcolite Games, Casey Muster, Dominic Valenciana, Izzy Coin, Joseph Blame. San Francisco, California, April 18, 1906. No one in California wants a Ford car, or any car really. I mean, why would you, right? It's the American West. Horses are plentiful, reliable, and require little maintenance. For instance, inside the city's only Ford dealership, its stock of Model A's have sat for a year without a sale. But then, the ground begins to shake. Buildings start to go under the street, and after a 42-second-long earthquake and a day of resulting fires, 80% of the city's buildings are destroyed. 3,000 die, with more screaming coming from underneath the rubble. Quickly, the dealer hands his stock of Model A's to the city. The cars climb hills and traverse brick-littered streets. They haul beams out of the way and carry supplies to refugees. They go where horses, terrified of the noise, smells, and flames, simply won't. And within 5 days, Ford representatives arrive with new stock, telling the city to pay when they can. California had just learned to love the automobile. Thanks so much to Imprint for helping me to learn cool new stuff really fast. The Model A was a revelation to people who previously didn't have cars, but it wasn't exactly a good car. In fact, Ford's rapid cycling through the alphabet models was partially because he kept fixing or upgrading designs. And through that time, he searched for his ideal car, one that would be affordable for the moderately successful farmer and bring freedom to rural America. And that is the Model T. The Model T was a highly engineered and innovative vehicle. While most cars trended heavy, the T was light for over 1,200 pounds. And unlike previous cars where the engine came in pieces, its engine block was made out of a single piece of metal. Originally, cars had placed the steering wheel on the right-hand side, a legacy of the railroad since that's where the conductor sat. But in the Model T, Ford moved it to the left, which he considered safe. The rest of the industry would learn to follow suit. And to ignite the gasoline airbags, it had a revolutionary magneto flywheel, which used magnets to create a spark. Further, he built it specifically to work on America's farm roads, which were mostly dirt, mud, and gravel. He gave the chassis high clearance and set the wheelbase the same as a carriage, so it could drive on hill ruts where the ground was firm. Throw some belts around the axle, and it could even be used as a portable motor for putting cars in places. And in 1908, all this could be yours for $850, where other comparable cars cost over $1,000. And as Ford moved into a mass production system in his new plant at Highland Park, that price would fall almost yearly, down to $490 in 2016, and by that time, over half of the cars in America were Ford Model Ts. Now, it's impossible to overstate the impact this car had on them. Rural families were previously rooted to their land, since horses tired out quickly. Heck, if a family member lived 20 to 30 miles away, you might not see them for decades. For these people, it truly opened the world to them and gave them a sense of freedom and happiness. It also connected people to America's wild places, allowing city dwellers to visit the woods, allowed access to better medical treatment for those not usually near it, and even connected it with vacation. The Model T also spawned a sexual revolution. Previously, dates happened within sight of family, or at least in the same town. But pick up a date in a car, and you and your sweetheart could get away from prying eyes in what was essentially a private room. This feature was so infamous, in fact, that writer John Steinbeck joked that half of a generation was actually conceived in Model Ts. For all of those reasons, Ford was bombarded with letters of thanks from farmers. Some even called him a liberator. It lifted us out of the mud, won us right, and gave us joy. The car was so ubiquitous, it actually had a whole subgenre of joke books written about it, laughing about how it wrapped, was so small, light, and cheap to purchase. And owners often superstitiously ascribed personalities to the vehicles, dismissing the temperamental behavior of its starter crank and engine, not as a flawed design, but simply as the vehicle making mischief or being stubborn. Remember, these were people who'd grown up dealing with horses who actually did exhibit these behaviors, so I can kind of see where they're coming from. Now, before the Model T, Ford's reputation was that of a talented and principled everyman who made good. He famously battled a patent troll who, bankrolled by an electric car company, claimed to have invented the internal combustion engine and wanted a percentage of every car sold. Ford's victory there, pitched as a Teddy Roosevelt-style antitrust battle, made him a hero. But once the Model T changed the country, Ford achieved superstardom. Books and magazine profiles touted him as a genius inventor and business wizard. Though, just to be clear, first or second generation European immigrants. Likewise, he didn't run his company alone. Ford Motor Company would likely have never even produced a single car if it hadn't been for James Cousins, a shrewd and steely executive who was one of the few people who could stand up to him. Had it not been for Cousins forcing the Model 8 to market, Ford probably would have destroyed the company by trying to build a product until it was perfected. It also wasn't Ford who originally championed the assembly, but rather engineer, executive, and Danish Charles Smith. In 1910, he held a demonstration where he towed a Model 2 chassis on a rope through the factory as workers stood along the line adding brakes and pads. And 3 years of research and development later, they tried producing with the flywheel magneto and realized it could triple production. They then expanded the program to engines, wheels, fenders, and soon the Ford plant at Highland Park was the first ever mass production. Parts went by workers on conveyor belts or hooks, and each man did a single task with his tools and supplies right by his side. They might put on a bolt but not tighten it, or tighten it into the system.
Surrender now.
This was the time it took to produce a Model T from over 12 hours per car down to 93 minutes. The workers hated it. They stood in place for hours doing mind-numbing dehumanizing work, plus the noise was deafening. Employee retention crashed, and the turnover rate soared to 380%. Taken out of every 90 hires within days. But Cousins had a solution, and he won Ford over to it. They'd raised the minimum wage at Ford from $2.34 a day to $5 a day and set the work week at 40 hours. To maximize the good press, he talked about it not as a simple raise, but a profit-sharing plan. And people went nuts. When it was, 100,000 people were outside in freezing temperatures, demanding jobs. At times, the mob got so rowdy, it would try to storm the gate and force security to turn the fire hoses on. Also, those workers might not be who your picture had. Ford's labor force was heavily comprised of recent immigrants, from Eastern Europeans and Scandinavians to Japanese and Arab Muslims. Around 30% of Ford's employees were black, and while they did tend to get the more dangerous jobs, the Ford Motor Company was unusual for the time in that it had black managers who possessed the authority to hire and fire white subordinates. But with all of that said, that $5 wage...
Just lay your weapons down and walk away.
Immigrating employees were required to attend language and civics classes, and upon graduating, they took part in a ritual called the Ford Welcome. Graduating workers would come to a gathering in their traditional national costumes, march into a giant black cauldron, and then come out the other side dressed in suits, waving American flags. See, if you were going to work at Ford's plant, you were going to live by Ford's rules, even off duty. Henry Ford despised drinking and smoking, and he hated seeing his workers take part in it. Similarly, he wanted all of his employees to follow the laws of propriety, only cohabitating once married and not renting rooms to boarders or tenants. So a group of Ford inspectors fanned out through Detroit, spying on his workers at home.
Fellow citizens, it's time to dare to compare with Bob's Discount Furniture. When you shop Bob's this President's Day weekend,
fanned out through Detroit, spying on his workers at home. They would peer into your windows or show up unannounced for inspections that could not be declined. If they found evidence of alcohol, if they discovered a boarder, an unmarried non-relative, or even if your house was not clean to Henry Ford's satisfaction, the inspectors would give you a warning and knock your pay back to $2.34. And if these infractions were not solved by the next time they visited, you were fired. There were always more men who wanted that $5 wage after all. And Ford's social engineering would not stop at terrorizing his workers. For as World War I concluded and the Roaring '20s began, Ford would descend into paranoid fantasies about his own labor force and take a deep dive into the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories of the interwar period. The dark side of Henry Ford was about to emerge, and no one, not his colleagues, family, company, or nation, would emerge unscathed. And speaking of darkness, I have a question for you about that. In those small moments of your life, right, when you're brewing coffee in line at the store or waiting for like a game to download or something, what are you doing with your time? Well, if you're like me, doom scrolling. Ugh. Just endlessly swiping on my phone through internet dribble that isn't constructive, and I'm never gonna remember in a few minutes anyway, which honestly just never leaves me feeling good. But that is why I am pretty pumped today to tell you about Imprint, because I'm finding it a way more rewarding use of my time. It's this learning app that lets you engage with a ton of topics like history, philosophy, science, technology, productivity, and more, but in bite-sized sessions throughout your day, with interactive lessons that you can complete in around 2 minutes. But seriously, don't let the quickness of it all fool you, because the lessons are strategically designed to help you understand complex concepts quickly and retain that information long-term. Not to mention, all of it is presented with in-depth visuals and animation to help you stay focused, which for me is a really big help. For instance, yesterday, rather than just stare into the soul-sucking voice of my social feed, I learned a bit about the science of sleep, how gerrymandering works, and read a visual blueprint on the first part of the walk God's germs of steel, which Jim would tell you about forever. That is not bad for 6 months. So if you want to see if this new way of learning works for you with zero risk, you can get a 7-day trial and blueprint absolutely free right now by clicking the link in the description. And the first 200 folks that sign up for an annual plan with our link will also receive 20% off their membership. Not to mention, every single sign-up really does help us continue to make our own brand of educational animated content as well. Again, click that link below to check out Imprint for yourself and make the most out of your minutes. Well, if it isn't Ahmed Ziad, Turk, Angela Valenciana, Arthur Games, Casey Buster, Dominic Valenciana, Izzy Coin, Joseph Lane, Kuya Goy, and Skylar Holmes. Thanks for being legendary patrons, y'all.
Just a weirdo!
Grosse Pointe Racetrack, October 10th, 1901, 7th lap. Henry Ford is terrified out of his mind. He entered his new car into this race to get his name in the newspapers, but not as an obituary. His racer, named Supersticks, has a 2.6-horsepower engine clocked at 72 miles an hour with no brakes. Also, he's never driven in a race and has never tried to stop a vehicle at low speed. His mechanics are running ready for breakdowns. Not to mention the track is a horse racing track with dirt mounted on the curbs to prevent cars from flying. But every time Ford takes the turn, it feels like he's going to ram into the fence. His mechanic has to lean out to keep the car from flipping, and noise from the grandstand washes over them as they whip past. Their opponent, Alexander Winton, is a seasoned race driver. Hours before, he'd just broken the land speed record. Winton is ahead, but Ford is getting used to the curves and catching up. Then Winton's machine starts bleeding blue smoke. Coming around, 8th lap, Ford punches it on the straightaway and passes Winton, whose car is wreathed with cloud as his mechanic pours oil on the overheating engine. Improbable. Ford crosses the finish line and swears never to race again. Thanks so much to Factor for keeping us well fed on a busy schedule. By the time Henry Ford won the 1901 sweepstakes, Detroit was well on its way to its nickname of Motor City. Car companies were opening everywhere in Detroit, with the same chaotic boomtown feel as the gold rush or oil strikes in Pennsylvania. And ironically, many of the people involved then are still household names today. In Detroit, the man to beat was Ransom E. Olds, whose Oldsmobiles were already in production in 1901. And for potential challengers like Ford, one of the best ways to attract attention and investment were publicity stunts, such as winning races, setting speed records, or driving long distances. Actually, Alan Clinton, his opponent in that races, had won backers for his own car company by driving his show model to New York City. Similarly, Ford's race winners secured the financial backing by a group of rich Detroiters who've been cultivating as potential investors for years. And in 1901, those investors helped him form the Henry Ford Company and started working on a production model single-cylinder car. Or rather, they were. Ford was mostly AWOL. See, he wasn't really interested in making single-cylinder runabouts that they turned around and made like a small carriage. Ford was usually elsewhere designing his next race car. After months of arguments with the investors and the engineers, he agreed to voluntarily launch the company with a $900 buy. This was part of a repeating pattern. Ford would present him for bankers and money. Folks, it only from. Ooh, there's the Ford. The weirdo! The Henry Ford Company no longer happened. Ford finally folded and never heard from again. No, I'm joking. It was renamed itself Cadillac. Meanwhile, Ford had enough money to support himself plus an idea for a race car that would build on his reputation as a designer of high-performance vehicles. He partnered with professional bicycle, the closest thing to seasoned race car during the time, to create the ultimate racing machine. Caring not for aesthetics, they stripped every bit of excess weight off it until it was nothing but a engine.
You picked the wrong state.
Because the car was so wild, the driver needed more leverage than a wheel to provide. They built two models, Crescent, Arrow, and 999. But apart from setting was a smart move in many ways. See, the cars were so associated with Ford that Red 999 won another high-profile race and went on to tour the country with Ford's Traffic as a designer, aka zero responsibility, but all in the floor. And it was off the back of that car that Ford met the Detroit Ford livery company, Alexander Malcolmson, and reformed the plan to manufacture vehicles. They would manufacture make those cells. The parts would come from suppliers who were better at manufacturing and the main machinist they relied on were a pair of brothers who Ford worked with at the head of the Ford company, who had experience in automobiles that were a little nuts. They were old-school French types, known for saloon brawls and patent revolvers. In fact, one brother had an altercation with a boss that ended with getting poisoned out of the poor guy and making him dance on his own bar top while he smashed up the establishment to the tune of $30,000 a bit. Those brothers were named John and Forrest Dodge. On June 16, 1903, Ford, Malcolmson, the Dodge brothers, and several small backers who borrowed money from friends and family gathered to form the Ford Motor Company.
Take them down!
Ford, with his history of failing on partners, however, would be vice president and not president this time. Of course, years later, these men would all be millionaires. But that was in no way certain in June 1903. They had a prototype of their new Model A and were getting orders, but they were assembling it in a rented wooden factory meant for carriage building. They ran into quality problems with suppliers and money dwindled. Plus, always preferring to work in 3 dimensions, Ford liked to jump from concept drawing to fabricating parts right away, then make adjustments from there, which is a very expensive way to work. When on July 23rd, the first Model A was delivered to a buyer, the company only had $223 in its bank account. Soon, though, money wouldn't be a problem. The 1903 Model A was a roaring success. However, sales did lag behind its rival Oldsmobile model, which sold for $150 cheaper. Ford kept tinkering, replacing the A with a modified Model AC with a redesigned engine. The next year, they followed it with the Model B, which put the engine up front rather than under the driver's seat. And by the end of 1904, Ford had moved its operation to a purpose-built brick plant and was the 4th largest car manufacturer in the nation, though still behind Oldsmobile and Cadillac. Ford began to rely less on suppliers, bringing their manufacturing, increasing the incomes. But as more and more models of cars played their letters of the alphabet, a battle was brewing. The corporate boardroom ordered the direction of the company. Malcolmson and Ford, who jointly owned the Ford stake, were at odds. Malcolmson wanted to produce high-end cars, like the enormously profitable Model K with its powerful 6-cylinder engine, whereas Ford wanted to capture the mid-range market with cars like the Model M, and eventually began moving that product to the price. The head of the company decided to form and bought out Malcolmson. Then he is able to a few months later, the Model M dead of a heart attack and Ford took over and powered down the solution. He set aside a room with several designers
Surrender now!
a car to the masses, not one that was as cheap as a $250 runabout vehicle. Other companies with a vehicle middle class families could afford, one that would liberate the American public and end the isolation of the country's rural areas. A car, in short, families like kids could afford. It would need to be straight, its 4-cylinder engine powerful but not overpowered, easy to drive and relatively attractive with a top speed of 42 miles an hour, and crucially, it should be easy to fix. An owner should be able to repair it themselves with no special training. But as he worked with his master, now the factory Ford being worked themselves started working on an experiment. See, Oldsmobile had recently sped up production with a concept known as the moving assembly, an idea that gave the engine put it on a moving track and had each worker use a specific part of the assembly. You could produce cars efficiently.
Take them out!
And his newly designed vehicle, the Model T, first crossed the factory
You're going down!
in 1908. It would do so on hanging tracks and conveyors. And true to Ford's vision, it would change the world. The Model T was enormously popular. 15 million would come on Ford's assembly lines in the next 19 years. They would be used as tractors and firefighting vehicles, as pleasure cars and workhorses of family transportation. But it would also be used for field ambulances. For as 1914 approached, the world was entering a dark period, and Henry Ford would enthusiastically descend into darkness as well.
You're
But
going
there is
down,
no way
Ruther!
I'm going to be able to handle telling you that part of the tale next week while my tummy's rumbling like it is. In fact, it's got my back. Or, stomach. You know what I mean. Okay, so with fall finally here, I really want to try and cram as much fun outdoor stuff into my schedule as possible, for the 1.5 months where it isn't either blisteringly hot or freezing cold in NYC, but with tons of episodes to work on, conferences to hit, and a very needy kitten that doesn't leave me with a ton of time to do things like, eat. And sure, I could always do lunch, but my bank account refuses to do it.
picked the wrong state.
And frozen meals just have too many preservatives and taste like I'm playing a joke on my taste buds. Well, this is precisely where Factor comes in to make sure I get the most delicious lab. They're my absolute favorite
Get on the
ready-to-eat meal
ground,
delivery
now.
service that takes the guesswork out of
Surrender
my
now.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. With every meal ready in 2 minutes, no prep, no mess, no cleanup, really just great food, pretty whenever I have time to eat. Factor's also got this big old rotating menu of over 34 delicious chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meal options for you to choose from each week to basically achieve any nutrition goals that you have. Everything from
Get on the
protein
ground,
plus,
now.
veggie options, calorie smart, which are meals that are around 550 calories or less, and it's a whole bunch more. And heck, why not even mix and match between all of those options? To ensure that everyone in your household is the exact same.
Get on the ground, now.
It's super easy. For instance, since I selected a bunch of different options this week, I had a ton to choose from for dinner last night. But I landed on the phenomenal blackened salmon with Cajun tomato gravy and cauliflower grits, and damn, that fishes was delicious. And because it was just so quick, I then got to use the time I saved to dive back into Baldur's Gate 3 and try to get Lizelle to fall in love with me. Oh wow, turns out she's just really into violence. The heart wants what the heart wants. I digress. So if you want to eat better while also being better with your time, all you gotta do is head to factor75.com or click the link below and then use the code EXTRACREDITS50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Then not only will you be getting fast, tasty meals that fit your lifestyle for a pretty good discount, by the way, but you'll also be helping to support our shows and all the people who make them. Ooh, and real quick before we go, I just tried their cold pressed juices and they actually gave the smoothies a run for their money. Once again, that is 50% off your first box at factor75.com and use the code EXTRACREDITS50. That's it. That's all I got for you this week. Until next time, happy eating, everybody.
Well, this is Ahmed Ziad, Turk, Angelo Valenciana, Arcalite Games, Casey Mustra, Dominic Valenciana, Izzy Coin, Joseph Lane, Guya Coin, and Skylar Holmes. Thanks for being legendary haters, y'all. Edison Company Annual Conference, Coney Island, New York. The electricity men sit around the table, talking about transportation. This engineer, teases one Edison employee, has built a quadricycle run by gasoline. Everyone then turns toward that young engineer, including the man at the head of the table, Thomas Edison. Is it a four-stage combustion? Asks Edison. The engineer, a young Henry Ford, breaks into a sweat. He's extremely nervous. Rightfully so. After all, Edison is an electricity man and likely favors electric vehicles. But still, Ford gets up and presents Edison, sketching out his engine while explaining the combustion process. How gas is an improvement over electricity because batteries are far too heavy and drain in cold weather. Then suddenly, mid-conversation, the old man rises and slams his hands down on the table. You've done it. He's just convinced Edison that the future will be gasoline-powered. And it is Henry Ford who will assemble that future at the rate of one car every 93 minutes. India, 6th century BCE. Princess Yashodhara stirs in her sleep. Her newborn son in her arms, more unsafe, not even a day old. But suddenly she feels like someone's watching her. She sits up to look at an doorway. To reassure herself, she turns and reaches across the bed toward her husband, Prince Siddhartha, but he's not there. Yashodhara runs through the palace, alerting guards, and her in-laws, the king and queen. The prince is gone. Is he taken? Riders go out into the night, soldiers comb the countryside, and at last, a servant returns with news. He had located Prince Siddhartha on the road, and the prince had given him a message. Siddhartha had given up worldly things and become a wandering ascetic. As proof, he holds out the royal vestments and symbols of rank that the prince had given him. Yashodhara falls to her knees regularly, glancing over at the child that her husband had been pregnant. Would you like to see the first episode of our brand new Henry Ford series immediately after watching this episode 2 whole weeks early? Well, not really, it's totally In our recent History of Buddhism series, we told one of the more common versions of the life of Siddhartha Gautama, better known as the Buddha, including the story of his renunciation, where he left his palace to seek spiritual truth. But no one's life exists in a vacuum, so when Siddhartha renounced his power, position, and wealth, he also renounced his life as a husband and a father. He didn't just leave treasure behind, but people. Chief among them being his wife, Princess Yashodhara. And her story, or rather the stories told about her, gives us a fascinating insight into how Buddhists formed their image of Buddha, the tensions between monks and society, and the role women play in the religion. According to tradition, Princess Yashodhara was born on the same day and month as her future husband Siddhartha. She was from a neighboring republic, and their families generally married each other, making them distant cousins. And while married at the age of 16, in some stories, they were actually karmically betrothed before they were born. A famous tale tells that in a previous rebirth, the pair were aristocratic and an aristocratic lady that tears out the clean, overgrown roadway for a holy man to pass through, with the future Siddhartha even using his body as a bridge across a muddy spot that had not yet been cleared. Then when the holy man granted each a request, the future Siddhartha asked to be reborn as a holy man himself who would relieve the world's suffering. The future Yashodhara, on the other hand, asks to help on this holy mission and be the wife of the young ascetic in all future rebirths. A request this previous incarnation of Siddhartha was not happy about, by the way. He had already given up worldly things like wives, and he didn't want to go backwards in the next life. But the holy man commented, saying that renouncing a future family would be one of the most important steps in his path of enlightenment. Speaking of which, fast forward to a lifetime and rebirth, and a 29-year-old Yashodhara wakes up with her husband has failed. The two would not meet again for years. At least, that's how tradition records it, because the earliest documents actually contain nothing about Yashodhara, failing to mention the Buddha married and lost his son. In those records, Buddha tells his father and stepmother he's leaving rather than sneaking out on a wild son. In fact, as a result, there are actually some historians who argue that Yashodhara never even existed and was an invention of later Buddhist authors who wanted to portray Buddha taking part in normative family life. However, others point out that his leaving on the eve of a son's birth would make a certain sense. See, at the time, aristocrats were only allowed to become religious ascetics after producing a son to secure the family line. Stories also differ on how Buddha's son Rahula got his name, which means fetter. In all of them, though, Siddhartha considers his new son a hindrance on his new spiritual quest and basically calls him a ball and chain or an obstacle to be overcome. Many traditions even state that Siddhartha refused to hold Rahula before he left, worrying it would tempt him to stay. But that is not the last we see of the Buddha's abandoned wife and son. Oh no. In fact, Yashodhara went on a spiritual quest of her own. After Siddhartha had attained enlightenment and began to teach, Yashodhara followed news of his spiritual progress from afar. And after learning about the codes of behavior Buddha had laid out for his monks, she adopted them, eating one meal a day, sleeping on a hard floor rather than a bed, and meditating. Often described as an act of loyalty, it might also be seen as an act of faith or a search for meaning. And that was her life. Simple meditation and raising her son, until the day her husband returned to the city. Rahula watched from the walls, entranced by the enlightened one, surrounded by 2,000 followers. Yashodhara then joined him. "That's your father," she said. "You must ask him for your inheritance." Now, this request has been suggested that it might have been a legal formality, that Siddhartha had never formally designated Rahula as his heir. But in other stories, she was actually hoping that Rahula's visit would tempt Siddhartha back to the palace. But regardless, when Rahula came to his father and asked for said inheritance, a strange thing happened. He left again, and Rahula followed him. And when Rahula caught up with the Buddha at his next destination, Buddha gave him his answer. Should he give Rahula a kingdom, that throne would crumble and pass away. "I will give him the wealth I obtained under the tree of enlightenment," he said, making him the heir of inheritance that does not end. He had Rahula ordained as the first Buddhist novice monk, and his son would go on to be one of Buddha's inner circle of disciples. Meanwhile, at the palace, Yashodhara had now lost her husband and her young son to the path of enlightenment, but they would all be reunited. When Siddhartha's stepmother, Maje Prajapati, led a group of 500 women to Buddha's forest sanctuary and petitioned to be ordained as nuns, Yashodhara was among them. When the Buddha turned them down, they asked his attendant Ananda to press their case. And when confronted with the question of whether women could attain enlightenment and nirvana, the Buddha said they
Get on
could.
the ground,
It was a position
now.
he'd stated before, but now had to put into practice. But there are also stories about the Buddha denigrating women, saying they would destroy the movement in 500 years, but some of those appear to have been inserted into later translations. In fact, Buddha at one point supposedly mentioned that gender made no difference to enlightenment. For Yashodhara, this acceptance as a nun was only a formalization of how she lived for years, but it also reunited her blood family in a spiritual community. There, she flourished, attaining a state of enlightenment within her lifetime, but not full nirvana. However, a story in the later Lotus Sutra claims that the Buddha himself declared that his former wife and stepmother would both attain Buddhahood. She died at the age of 78, surviving her son but not her former husband, who would live another 2 years. Now, the story of Yashoda, with its many faces and variations, reveals interesting things about Buddhism's early and evolving relationship with women and family. It's clear from the records that early Buddhists considered a family to be stumbling blocks on the way to spiritual attainment, and that removal from even the most personal connections was necessary to walk the path. But other traditions may be defensive, meant to show that Buddha could marry and reproduce, both things considered necessary at the time for great men to do. As for Yashodhara, her faithfulness would serve as an example for future women in Buddhism, whether that be the esoteric traditions of the Himalayas, where women take major roles in ritual, Empress Wu Zetian, who helped spread the religion in China, or nuns today who are pushing to recreate their orders in Theravada Buddhism. But also, the story of Yashodhara expresses the emotional tension between family and religion. These stories don't shy away from the emotional anguish Siddhartha's quest caused his family, and that's still an issue in Buddhism today. After all, not every parent or spouse is happy when a loved one becomes a mother. Even in the days of instant communication, it can still be hard for families to see members enter a monastery. And some modern readers have recast Siddhartha's renunciation as a story of divorce. Because like many religious tales, the enduring power of Yashodhara's story is how it can be reinterpreted to serve different cultures and uses. Depending on how it's told, she can be an obstacle to the Buddha, a devout supporter, or a tragic martyr. But however the story is told, this image of Siddhartha looking on at his sleeping wife and child, knowing he's going to leave them, remains totally heart-wrenching over 2 millennia after it was recorded. And as we close out this series, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming along with us on this 6-week exploration into Buddhism's expansion and its major historical claims. I love this series deeply, and I was so excited when our patrons voted on it. But you know, one of the reasons that we as a studio can take the time to explore topics like this that might not be as flashy as, say, well-known wars or ubiquitous famous figures is due to the support that we get from Nebula, our favorite Greater Urban-operated streaming service. And actually, with the help of a bunch of our Greater friends over on Nebula, we've ramped up an awesome feature called Nebula Force. Basically, it works like this. Thanks to their support, we can produce and release our extra history series episodes on Nebula at least a full week before they're posted to YouTube. However, this time around, I am very, very excited to announce that you can actually go watch the first episode of our brand new series on Henry Ford 2. China, 640. City-state of Chiang Rai, Thailand. Northeast India, circa 3rd century. Northern India, 6th century BC. Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 1255 BCE. The men and women of Nubia gather to see the man who claims to be their ruler by right of conquest. But they see more than a king. Ramses the Great has come to inaugurate the enormous temple he has built, one that he commissioned to overawe and Egyptianize the Nubians. His official name, the Temple of Ramses, beloved of Abu. And it's a temple to himself. The entrance is flanked with statues of Ramses, 66 feet high, and inside he's enthroned as a god within the divine pantheon. The walls tell of his great deeds at the Battle of Kadesh, his victories over the Shurden and the Nubians, and his treaty with the Hittites. Alongside him in the inaugural ritual is his great wife, Nefertari. Her own temple is within sight, but she's breathing hard under the desert sun, for she is dying. And soon, her husband, the God King, will face the rest of his long reign alone. Chamonix, France, 1645. Charles Auguste Dussala. The Colored Orphanage Asylum. Abu Simbel. The Colored Orphanage Asylum, New York City, July 13th, 1863. 233 black children between the ages of 5 and 16, who only moments ago had been in classrooms, are now gathered in a single open space. Many of them are frightened and crying. They can hear the angry, racist mob outside, shouting obscenities as they brawl with the policemen shielding the building. The glowing torches light up the windows. Guided by caregivers, these children make their way to a back exit, but the building is surrounded and escape is not guaranteed. As they come through the dining room, one of the girls cries out, "The Bible! We forgot the Bible!" A matron turns around. Finding her voice, she reaches for the
Just
child.
lay your
"Come along,
weapons down
sweetie. You can
and
bring the
walk
Bible,
away."
but we must go now, okay?" That Bible will be one of the only objects from this orphanage to survive the night. For New York is burning, and tomorrow this building will be nothing but a charred husk.
Surrender
Thanks so much
now.
to Factor for keeping us
Take them
history-loving
out.
beings well
Take
fed
them.
fast. In July of 1863, New York City descended into a cauldron of anti-authority mob actions and racist violence. But to understand surrender now, we need to take a step back and look at the American Civil War as a whole. In 1861, most U.S. citizens thought the war would be over quickly, but those illusions were squashed
them
after
out.
the opening battles, inflicted nearly 120,000 casualties with no end in sight. This put both armies into crisis mode, especially when it came to recruitment, since after the initial patriotic push, volunteers dwindled. In 1862, with the war turning into a costly stalemate and both sides looking for a way to strike a decisive blow, both the United States and the rebel Confederacy implemented military drafts. But unlike later American drafts, like the World Wars or Vietnam, these Civil War laws were explicitly written so that the privileged classes could avoid military service. In the Confederacy, anyone who owned more than 20 slaves was exempt from the draft, a provision that infuriated poor and middle-class Southerners. After all, the rebel states were waging a war to protect the institution of slavery, and yet plantation owners, the people benefiting from slavery most, would just opt out of the fight.
What does innovation sound like? It sounds like being in the moment with the people you serve, thanks to Highland's intelligent enterprise content solutions. Hi, for innovators everywhere, visit Highland.com.
Similarly, up north, the Union draft also had paths the rich could use to avoid serving, and they were just as blatant and despicable. A major difference was that in the north, if you were well-heeled and didn't want to fight, you could either pay $300 to the draft office or hire some poor soul to go to war in your place. In New York, the largest city in the Union, this was predictably unpopular with the city's poor and middle class, but it was especially galling to its large population of recently arrived immigrants. In the previous decades, a series of European crises ranging from the revolutions of 1848 to the Irish potato famine triggered a mass migration that delivered over 1.7 million immigrants to the port of New York. And among the most downtrodden of these European migrants were Irish Catholics. So when the federal government announced the Union Draft Lottery in the spring of 1863, the Irish and other immigrants who'd applied for citizenship were surprised to find themselves subject to it. Of course, few in the Irish working class could afford a $300 exemption. In fact, most of them barely cleared $2 a day while doing back-breaking work and living in overcrowded slums. Plus, as far as they were concerned, the Civil War really didn't have anything to do with them, so why should they have to risk their lives? Naturally, politicians like Democrat and Tammany Hall crony Ferdinand Wood decided to exploit this division and gain favor with the city's swelling immigrant population. As mayor, he pushed a pro-Confederacy agenda and opposed Republican abolitionists. Wood even went so far as to push for New York to secede from the Union, a motion that the city council quickly shot down. But these provocative moves were lucrative for Wood. At the time, the Democratic Party was pro-slavery, and those interests in the North were happy to finance Mayor Wood's political machine. And since New York's economy was largely dependent on cotton exports, Wood's pro-South rhetoric appealed to the city's working class and poor whites, whose industries had been squeezed by the war. This anger over the Union draft also heightened tensions between Irish and New York's population of free African Americans, who both competed for the same jobs. You see, many Irish perceived the war as being fought on behalf of slaves and the black community, but since African Americans weren't allowed citizenship, they also weren't eligible for the draft. From this, a recipe for disaster was born. Two marginalized communities, caught in a whirlwind of racism and resentment as newspapers and local politicians worked the Irish immigrants and even some native-born citizens into a lab. Then these agitators got a new arrow in their quiver on January 1st, 1863, when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and New York Democrats began to use scare tactics, claiming an influx of freed African Americans would come north and take jobs from white people. And then came the first day of the draft proper, July 12th, 1863. Though that day passed without incident, with officials picking names out of a twirling lottery barrel. Granted, the crowd left the spectacle seething with anger. The riot itself would start during the second drawing on July 13th in front of the U.S. Provost Office on 3rd Ave and 47th Street. A gunshot rang out, signaling the raucous crowd that had gathered to attack the building. Rioters stormed the office, beat the employees, and set the building on fire. Mobs ambushed volunteer firemen as they attempted to stop the blaze, then cut telegraph wires to prevent police and property owners calling for help. The outnumbered New York Police Department tried to stop the violence, while a previous uprising, the Dead Rabbit Riots, which you can learn about in our Irish Potato Family series here, had been put down in the past by a Union militia. Currently, those troops had been dispatched to Gettysburg. So as a result, the riots spread unchecked. The mob was not without purpose, however, as the rioters were mostly Irish Catholic. They purposely attacked and looted the homes of wealthy abolitionists, especially along Fifth Avenue. Police stations were besieged, Protestant charities like the Five Points Mission and abolitionist newspaper buildings, large and small, were targeted. Yet the newspaper offices put up a surprising fight. Despite being known for anti-Irish editorials, police managed to save the abolitionist newspaper The Tribune by attacking the mob from behind. Meanwhile, at the nearby New York Times building, the editor and staff actually scared off rioters by manning two, probably unloaded, Gatling guns, which may have been there for article research. But as the riot continued, the focus shifted. Originally anti-draft and anti-abolitionist, it quickly descended into a race riot specifically targeting African Americans. In a blatant attempt to eliminate them as job competition, the mob sought out black dock workers to beat, stab, and lynch, and businesses that served black people were looted and burned. Among the destroyed was an establishment said to have been the first black-owned pharmacy in the United States. And finally, the Colored Orphan Asylum on Fifth Avenue, viewed as a symbol of white altruism towards African Americans, found itself under siege. While all 233 children escaped, thanks to police and staff, a few people were injured trying to stop the burning and looting. This included Fire Chief John Decker, whose repeated attempts to stop the attack infuriated the crowd. At one point, his fire had narrowly saved him from lynching. This looting and violence went on for another 2 days, until, on January 16th, troops returned from the Battle of Gettysburg, mobilized, and engaged the rioters. Despite nearly 50 buildings destroyed and the moderate equivalent of $100 million worth of property damage, the rioters went largely unpunished. Only 67 of them saw the insane courthouse, and none received significant jail time. Meanwhile, nearly 120 black men lost their lives in the same incident. The real change being an eventual shift in the attitudes. After the war, the Irish and Germans, who had served a great role in the America, found a modicum of acceptance in North America. In part due to men like for political constituency. Politicians continued to use race and economic arguments to pit these groups against African Americans who didn't reap the same rewards for military service. And of course, anti-immigrant sentiment found different targets in the Chinese, Italian, and Jewish refugees. And as we look back at this history, it can't help but feel familiar, since to this day there are those that practice the politics of division and pitting groups against one another. Of course, one can only hope that by examining incidents like the 1863 riots, we not only begin to recognize these tactics for what they are, but also have a better understanding that whenever someone in power tells you to hate another stigmatized group, their goal is never to increase your power, rather the exact opposite. Once again, thank you so much to Factor for believing that important stories from history should continue to be told, though I imagine not on an empty stomach. Factor is my favorite. Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 1255 BCE. The men and women of Nubia gather to see the man who claims to be their ruler by right of conquest, but they see more than a king. Ramses the Great has come to inaugurate the enormous temple he has built, one that he commissioned to overawe and Egyptianize the Nubians. Its official name, the Temple of Ramses, beloved of Amun, and it's a temple to himself. The entrance is flanked with statues of Ramses, 66 feet high, and inside he's enthroned as a god within the divine pantheon. The walls tell of his great deeds at the Battle of Kadesh, his victories over the Shurden and the Nubians, and his treaty with the Hittites. Alongside him in the inaugural ritual is his great wife, Nefertari. Her own temple is within sight, but she's breathing hard under the desert sun, for she is dying. And soon, her husband, the God King, will face the rest of his long reign alone. This episode was made possible by the fine folks over at Total War Pharaoh, a phenomenal new entry into the Total War franchise I am super pumped about that also ties into today's historical tale. And it's available to snag right the heck now at the link below. Go for it! Last episode, we talked about the Battle of Kadesh and how Ramses used it as propaganda for the rest of his reign, despite the fact he eventually lost. Or did he? Because Ramses had a workaround for that. You see, when he got back to Egypt, he simply declared the battle an overwhelming victory, and he carved this achievement into the walls of temples across Egypt. In Egyptian religion, temple walls were sacred spaces, considered the actual world documents. So by carving his victory into temples, he essentially made that victory true. Which is kind of ironic in a way, since most people don't remember Ramses for the Battle of Kadesh at all, but rather as Egypt's greatest builder. See, when he came to power, he didn't realize that he'd have such a long reign. In fact, his father had died early, so in panic, Ramses entered a fever of building projects. First, he hit the low-hanging fruit, completing temples his father had nearly finished, and, chiseling his own cartouche on them. Next, he put his stamp on some things that he hadn't strictly, built, noticing that the shallow wall carvings of previous dynasties were easily obliterated. He ordered his name and scenes carved so deep, so they couldn't be altered, and so the deep shadow made them more dramatic. Next, he launched perhaps his greatest project, moving the capital from Thebes to a new city in the east, built using one of his father's summer palaces as a starting point. This new city, named Ramses, or Domain of Ramses' Great Invictus, what else, was more of a military base than a cultural center, however. For Ramses knew that much of his early reign would be about securing and controlling Canaan and Nubia, and it would serve as a launching point for those expeditions. When the army marched to Kadesh, it did so for Ramses. Then came a massive mortuary temple complex, the Ramses, where he could be worshipped as the heaven. At the same period came Abu Simbel and enormous statues across his territory. All of which proclaimed his great victory at Kadesh. Unusually, these did not merely depict Ramses as a favored by gods who would one day join. Now, they showed him as already deified. Not only that, Ramses would make sacrifices to himself, or rather to God with him. So, stay with me for a moment. Ramses would go to the Ramesseum and pass giant statues of Ramses and carvings of Ramses sacrificing to Ramses before he, you guessed it, sacrificed to Ramses. And if you think that's bananas, there's also some evidence he would sometimes stand on the lap of his giant statues and throw gifts into the crowd below. Now, this is possibly not just due to arrogance. Coming from a new dynasty with a less than stellar bloodline, Ramses likely thought these displays were necessary to justify his hold on power. But let's not absolve him totally of ego either. His diplomatic letters to his enemies turned friends, the Hittites, betrayed a certain prickly, quarrelsome nature and a tendency to lash out if he felt disrespected. His correspondence is full of complaints about the quality of diplomatic gifts. And once, when a Hittite king asked that Ramses send Egyptian doctors and medicines, the best in the ancient world, mind you, to help his sister conceive a child, the pharaoh kinda snapped. She is 50 or 60. No man can prepare medicine to help her. Yeah, it wasn't surprising that Nefertari handled a significant amount of the diplomatic lettering, her correspondence being far more, diplomatic. At least it was for the first 25 years of his reign, because by year 24, Nefertari started to lead. Temple rulers set Abu Simbel to show their eldest daughter conducting some inaugural rituals, suggesting that Nefertari, who was herself a major feature of the temple, probably had to bow out. When she died, he interred her in a massive and opulent tomb, the largest in the Valley of the Queens, and while he took another chief wife who he favored, it's clear that Nefertari was his greatest love. Now, the irony of Ramses' reign, however, is that all of this constant effort to secure a legacy worked a little too well. First of all, his building projects set a standard that none of his successors could live up to, especially if they believed the propaganda on his temple walls. 9 other pharaohs would choose the name Ramses, but with none of them ever truly recapturing his glory. And speaking of those who came after him, that itself became a bit of an issue. See, Ramses is recorded as having 200 wives, including 2 daughters of Hittite kings, and from those wives, he had around 100 legitimate children. So many that he actually, symbolically, married several daughters in order to keep their status high. We think around 50 of these children were boys, with a line of succession that was heavily complicated by being born to multiple wives of varying rank. Now, we've talked a lot on this show about the problem of rulers not being able to produce a male heir, right? Well, here's the rare instance of a ruler with too many male heirs. This alone might not have been a big deal. After all, Ramses not only promoted and favored his sons to an unusual extent. The first 8 were featured in order on several monuments. He actively raised their profiles.
Take them out.
No, the problem was that he just lived so darn long. His first son with Nefertari, a hardy man who served as an army commander, died a year after his mother. His second son was crown prince for 25 years, until the 50th year of his father's reign, when he too died. Ramses' third son had already passed away at that point, so now his fourth son had become heir. That son, Kayamwasep, has been called the first Egyptologist. A high priest, he made it his life's mission to uncover and restore artifacts and tombs that were ancient even in the time of Ramses, with some burials stretching back 1,000 years. However, he'd also occasionally stamp his father's name on artifacts to symbolically claim them, even while restored. In his role as priest, he also helped his father celebrate the Sed Festival, a celebration that was conducted for the first time in the 30th year of a pharaoh's reign, then every 3 years after that. Ramses celebrated 12. He ruled for 66 years, well into his 90s, and each year he sent more and more of his beloved sons to the massive tomb he dug out in the Valley of the Kings. By the time Kayamwasep died, so many of his brothers had already gone to the tomb that it was actually Ramses' 13th son, Merneptah, who took over as crown prince. And it was he who, when his father finally died, oversaw the funeral rites and burial. Yet Merneptah was already 70 and would only rule for a decade. His sons and grandsons, their power increased by Ramses having named so many children to high positions, would then squabble for the throne, ensuring that the 19th dynasty survived only 24 years after Ramses' death. This period of infighting weakened Egypt ahead of the Bronze Age collapse, which sent the whole region into a decline. Were it not for a strong pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, Ramses III, borrowing his distant ancestor's great name, Egypt might have collapsed entirely. But even so, Ramses' legacy was secure. Having shaped Egypt so thoroughly, it was inevitable that later generations would know him as a great ruler. A huge bust of his head remains a central attraction at the British Museum. Abu Simbel is one of Egypt's most famous sights, and his monuments inspired Shelley's famous poem, Ozymandias, reflecting on the passing nature of power. It's no wonder that in 2021, when the Egyptian government moved 22 pharaohs from the Egyptian Museum to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, in capsules decorated like traditional funeral modes, the mummy of Ramses the Great attracted extra attention from the press and onlookers, and preceded by actual chariots. The victor of Kadesh, the great builder of Egypt, once again made a procession to his honored resting place. Now that is a lasting legacy. But you know, maybe you think you could do better, right? Well, if so, you can now put your money where your mouth is by forging your legacy as the next ruler of Bronze Age Egypt in the epic new game, Total War Pharaoh, who we totally thank for making this episode possible. Total War Pharaoh is just the ultimate Bronze Age strategy game where you can not only explore ancient Egypt during its last golden age, rendered in just incredible historical detail, but where you can also forge your own path and try to stand against Bronze Age threats. The single-player sandbox campaign is just absolutely massive and allows you to take control of 8 different faction leaders spanning a variety of rich cultures of the period, but that also offer their own unique playstyles. For instance, you could become a fierce warrior or brilliant tactician, and then lead massive armies into epic real-time battles, or you could use grand strategy to conquer and manage an ever-evolving economy, and boost your own political standing in course to defend the rich lands of Egypt, Canaan, and Syria. But really, one of my absolute favorite tactical elements is you have to be prepared for unexpected things like intense changes of weather that can directly impact your community's chances of survival on the battlefield, and utilize their dynamic fire system to engulf armies and spread click that link below for your favorite digital marketplace of choice and snag yourself a copy of Total Warfare. And if you do, maybe I'll see you on the battlefield. Valencia, Turk, Angelo Valenciana, Frank Games, Casey Euster, Dominic Valenciana, Izzy Coin, Joseph Lane, Julia Coin, and Skylar Holmes. Thanks for being legendary patrons, y'all.
The weirdo.
Chamonix, France, 1645. Charles Auguste Crusade, Bishop of Geneva, stands before the demon-possessed Titan which has attacked the village. He raises his arms in the colored orphanage's Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 1255. Chamonix, France, 1645. Charles Auguste Dussala, Bishop of Geneva, stands before the demon-possessed Titan which has attacked the village. The colored orphanage asylum, Abu Simbel Temple Complex, Chamonix, France, 1645. Charles Auguste Dussala, Bishop of Geneva, stands before the demon-possessed Titan which has attacked the village. He raises his arms in the rites of exorcism, calling on heaven to deliver the village from lightning, tempest, earthquake, and plague. Deliver us! The colored orphanage of Abu Simbel Temple, Chamonix, France. The colored orphanage asylum, New York City, July 13, 1863. Abu Simbel Temple Complex, Chamonix, France. The colored orphanage asylum, Abu Simbel Temple, Chamonix, France. The colored orphanage, Abu Simbel Temple, Chamonix, France, 16. The colored orphanage asylum, New York City, July 13, 1863. 233 black children between the ages of 5 and 16, who only moments ago had been in classrooms, are now gathered in a still open space. Many of them are frightened and crying. They can hear the angry, racist mob outside shouting obscenities as they brawl with the policemen shielding the building. The glowing torches light up the windows. Guided by caregivers, these children make their way to a little exit, but the building is surrounded and escape is not guaranteed. As they come to the dining room, one of the girls cries out, "The Bible! We forgot the Bible!" A matron turns around, finding the voice she reaches for the child. "Come along, sweetie. You can bring the Bible, but you must go now, okay?" That Bible will be one of the only objects from this orphanage to survive the night. Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 1255.
Surrender
The
now.
men and women of Nubia gather to see the man who claims to be their ruler by right of conquest. The date, Chamonix, France, 1645. Charles Auguste Dussala, Bishop of Geneva, stands before the demon-possessed Titan which has attacked the village. He raises his arms in the rites of exorcism, calling on heaven to deliver the village from lightning, tempest, earthquake, and plague. Deliver us! Repeat the 300 villagers. Then he casts holy water on the surface of the monster before him, only for it to freeze. For this fiendish menace sneaking down the valley is in fact a glacier. It advances the distance of a musket shot each day, ruining cropland and threatening homes. The villagers, furious at government inaction, are refusing to pay their taxes until something is done. Dussala concludes his rites, and whether through divine action or coincidence, it seems to work. The glacier retreats over the next several years, leaving in its wake barren, damaged cropland, scoured clean not by demons, but by the Little Ice Age. Want to watch the next episode of our Little Ice Age series immediately after watching this one a full week early? Well, if any of the first you totally can. Learn how after the episode. The Exorcism at Chamonix sounds like an outlier. One of those weird pieces of trivia from list articles, right? But it wasn't a one-off. In fact, clergy blessing or even exorcising glaciers in the Swiss Alps became a trend during the 17th century. It was done at least once more in the 1640s, at another village in 1653, and once on the same glacier in 1664 and 1669. Several settlements in the area even formed pacts with God that if the villagers lived righteous lives, he would then cause the glaciers to recede. And in a strange way, they weren't wrong to call on heavenly forces, because whether you're religious or not, it's undeniable that in the mid-17th century, these villages, indeed the whole world, lay in the grip of powerful cosmic forces. A period of global cooling historians and climate scientists refer to as the Little Ice Age. historians' period, which some historians place from 1300 to 1850. Global temperatures dropped an average of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, causing massive climatic shifts. Agricultural losses led to widespread famine and disease outbreaks, hunger encouraged rebellion, and people groups entered mass migrations. The results of this occasionally read as apocalyptic. Birds dropped dead from the sky, and hailstorms pounded down whole fields of wheat. It ruined both the medieval wine industry in southern England and the centuries-old practice of raising orange groves in China. Not to mention, it became a key factor in multiple historical events, from Napoleon's invasion of Russia to the Manchu takeover of China, to European witch hunts and the failure of the Norse colonies in Greenland. But before we get to any of that, we do need to make a few things clear. First of all, we should understand that the Little Ice Age is a theory. Granted, a theory with a lot of evidence, but there is no full consensus among historians or climatologists about how to define or explain this period. For example, there's still debate around when the Little Ice Age began. Some historians mark out a fairly broad period, beginning around 1300, while others suggest that the real Little Ice Age didn't start until the 16th century. For what it's worth, we're going to go with the former, more just for the sake of giving a complete picture. But even more contentious is why it occurred, a question that hasn't been definitively answered. In fact, this is one of the hottest topics among specialists in this field, with differing interpretations of data or methods of data collection frequently coming under fire. Of course, that data comes from a range of sources. These include core samples from Arctic ice and C4 sediment, as well as layers of volcanic ash, and even tree rings. Yeah, see, tree rings grow thicker in warmer years than they do in cold ones. Then, of course, there are the historical chronicles, tax and crop yield records, and even astronomical observations. Plus, diaries and letters can also play a role in identifying extreme weather events. And from all of these data points, a picture of the period has emerged, along with hypotheses of why it happened. But at the core of all of these theories is a mind-blowing truth, one that's easy to forget in our modern technological age. Every historical event, in every time and place, from the discovery of fire to Caesar's assassination, to World War II, to the release of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, all occurred on a geologically active sphere of rock with a molten core encased in an envelope of changing atmosphere revolving and wobbling on its axis as it orbited a radioactive star. Literally, all of our history has been subject to natural forces so powerful that in the past we either attributed them to gods or thought they themselves were gods. And those factors have varied over time, from how far the Earth was from the Sun, to its tilt, to the composition of its atmosphere. It's a thing we inherently understand, but don't always think about when we discuss, say, crop failures in medieval Europe. But we should, because the Earth's climate is not static. It changes naturally due to a host of factors. Most theories about the Little Ice Age, for example, have to do, at least in part, with the radioactive output of the Sun. You see, the Sun's output is not constant either, and even a reduction of 0.5% could lead to that 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius of cooling. This is especially cited as the cause of the coldest periods of the crisis from 1645 to 1715, when observable sunspots became much rarer than normal. This stretch, known as the Muller minimum, may be responsible for the cooling as a whole, or simply exacerbated a process already in motion. Others suggest the tilt of the Earth changed, as it sometimes does. And yet another theory centers around thermohaline circulation, sometimes called the oceanic conveyor belt. When functioning normally, surface salt water is warmed by the sun in the tropics and carried north by the Gulf Stream winds. However, as it approaches cold northern climates and cools, it becomes denser and sinks beneath the warmer salt water into the ocean basin. After centuries of being pushed along these currents, it upwells back into the Southern Ocean or North Pacific to start the cycle again. Thermohaline circulation carries heat, making places like Britain and the east coast of the U.S. warmer than they'd otherwise be. But it's also dependent on a balance of temperature and salinity, the saltiness of the water. So, if a particularly warm period melts northern glaciers and dumps a bunch of fresh water into the cycle, which can't sink because even frigid fresh water is less dense than warm salt water, this can disrupt or even stop the circulation and cause prevailing winds to become bitterly cold. And it just so happens that a warmer era, the medieval warm period, preceded the Little Ice Age. Other researchers point out that this period saw high volcanic action, with 5 eruptions per century on the level of the 1883 Krakatoa eruption. When that large a volcano blows, it throws sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, where it bonds with water to become sulfuric acid. This then absorbs and reflects solar radiation, meaning less reaches the Earth's surface. And of course, the Little Ice Age could have been caused by more than one of these, with each compounding the other. which may be what happened in 1300, when the climate suddenly shifted. For 4 centuries, the North Atlantic had experienced the medieval warm period, where global average temperatures were about a degree cooler than today. The result was a
state.
bumper harvests expanded the European population. Melting sea ice allowed the Norse to settle Greenland and Iceland, and the first major era of cathedral building commenced. Life was still hard for the population, who were largely subsistence farmers, but there were fewer families. However, by 1303, it was clear things were changing. The Baltic froze, and bizarre weather plagued northwestern Europe. The temperature was not just getting colder, mind you, but more erratic. For much like our current day man-made climate crisis, a cooling climate could also trigger extreme weather events like drought, flood, hail, or terrible storms. And in 1315, it started to rain. Not the expected rains, mind you, but a deluge. It flattened wheat stalks and turned fields to mud. It washed away salt deposits so wheat couldn't be stored, and it continued like that for 5 years. For Europe was about to experience the Great Famine of 1350, where crop yields would not recover in some places until 1352, where bread became so scarce that at one point the people could not find any for purchase, and where whole villages disappeared, and families sold or killed children to save resources. It's a terrible story, but also one of adaptation and resilience. And it's one that's important for us to know. Because under current policies, we're expecting to see 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius of warming by the end of this century, and there are expensive lessons to learn. For in the Swiss Alps, those villages have recently changed their pact with God. As of 2010, they're no longer praying for the glaciers to recede, but rather to stop melting. That's the future of our story, however. In 1315, it is still raining, and the Black Death is waiting in the wings. But you, my history-loving friend, do not have to. The colorful village asylum, New York City, Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 12, Chamonix. Chamonix, France, 1645. Charles Auguste de Sade, Bishop of Geneva, stands before the demon-possessed Titan which has attacked the village. He raises it. Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 1255 BCE. The men and women of Nubia gather to see the man who claims to be their ruler by right of conquest. But they see more than a king. Ramses the Great has come to inaugurate the enormous temple he has built, one that he commissioned to overawe an Egyptian Nubians. His official name, the Temple of Ramses, beloved of Abu, and it's a temple to himself. The entrance is flanked with statues of Ramses, 66 feet high, and inside he's enthroned as a god within the divine pantheon. The walls tell of his great deeds at the Battle of Kadesh, his victories over the Shurden and the Nubians, and his treaty with the Hittites. Alongside him in the inaugural ritual is his great wife, Nefertari. Her own temple is within sight, but she's breathing hard under the desert sun, for she is dying. And soon, her husband, God King, will face the rest of his long reign alone. This episode was made possible by the fine folks over at Total Warfare, a phenomenal new entry into the Total War franchise I am super pumped about that also ties into today's historical tale. And it's available to snag right the heck now at the link below. Go forth! Last episode, we talked about the Battle of Kadesh and how Ramses used it as propaganda for the rest of his reign, despite the fact he essentially lost. Or did he? Because Ramses had a workaround for that. You see, when he got back to Egypt, he simply declared the battle an overwhelming victory, and he carved this achievement into the walls of temples across Egypt. In Egyptian religion, temple walls were sacred spaces, considered the actual words of the gods. So by carving his victory into temples, he essentially made that victory true. Which is kind of ironic in a way, since most people don't remember Ramses for the Battle of Kadesh at all, but rather as Egypt's greatest builder. See, when he came to power, he didn't realize that he'd have such a long reign. In fact, his father had died early, so in panic, Ramses entered a fever of building projects. First, he hit the low hanging, completing temples his father had nearly finished, and even chiseling his own project John. Next, he put his stamp on some things that he hadn't strictly, built. Noticing that the shallow wall carvings of previous dynasties were easily obliterated, he ordered his name and scene carved so deep so they couldn't be altered, and so the deep shadow made them more dramatic. Next, he launched perhaps his greatest project, than a cultural center, however. For Ramses knew that much of his early reign would be about securing and patrolling Canaan and Nubia, and it would serve as a launching point for those expeditions. When the army marched to Kadesh, it did so from Ramses. Then came a massive mortuary temple complex, the Red Field, where he could be worshipped after death. At the same period came Abu Simbel and enormous statues across his territory, all of whom proclaimed his great victory at Kadesh. Unusually, though, these did not merely depict Ramses as a king favored by the gods, who would one day change. Now, they showed him as already deified. Not only that, Ramses would make sacrifices to himself, or rather the god he would be. So, stay with me for a moment. Ramses would go to the sea and pass giant statues of Ramses and carvings of Ramses sacrificing to Ramses before he, you guessed it, sacrificed to Ramses. And if you think that's bananas, there's also some evidence he would sometimes stand on the lap of his giant statue and throw gifts into the crowd below. Now, this is possibly not just due to him. Coming from a new dynasty with a less than stellar bloodline, Ramses likely thought these displays were necessary to justify his hold on power. But let's not absolve him totally of ego either. His diplomatic letters to his enemies-turned-friends, the Hittites, betrayed a certain prickly, quarrelsome nature and a tendency to lash out if he felt disrespected. His correspondence is full of complaints about the quality of diplomatic gifts. And once, when a Hittite king asked that Ramses send Egyptian doctors and medicines, the best in the ancient world, mind you, to help his sister conceive a child, the pharaoh kinda snapped. She is 50 or 60. No man can prepare medicine to help her. Yeah, it wasn't surprising that Nefertari handled a significant amount of the diplomatic letter writing, her correspondence being far more, well, diplomatic. At least it was for the first 25 years of his reign, because by year 24, Nefertari started to weaken. Temple reliefs at Abu Simbel show their eldest daughter conducting some inaugural rituals, suggesting that Nefertari, who was herself a major feature of the temple, probably had to bow out. When she died, he interred her in a massive and opulent tomb, the largest in the Valley of the Queens. And while he took another chief wife who he favored, it's clear that Nefertari was his greatest love. Now, the irony of Ramses' reign, however, is that all of this constant effort to secure a legacy worked a little too well. First of all, his building projects set a standard that none of his successors could live up to, especially if they believed the propaganda on his temple walls. 9 other pharaohs would choose the name Ramses, but with none of them ever truly capturing his glory. And speaking of those who came after him, that itself became a bit of an issue. See, Ramses is recorded as having 200 wives, including 2 daughters of Hittite kings, and from those wives, he had around 100 legitimate children. So many that he actually, symbolically, married several daughters in order to keep their status high. We think around 50 of these children were boys, with a line of succession that was heavily complicated by being born to multiple wives of varying rank. Now, we've talked a lot on this show about the problem of rulers not being able to produce a male heir, right? Well, here's the rare instance of a ruler with too many male heirs. This alone might not have been a big deal, though. After all, Ramses not only promoted and favored his sons to an unusual extent, the first 8 were featured in order on several monuments, he actively raised their profiles. No, the problem was that he just lived so darn long. His first son was Nefertari, a hardy man who served as army commander, died a year after his mother's. His second son was crowned prince for 25 years, until the 50th year of his father's reign, when he too died. Ramses' third son had already passed away at that point, so now his fourth son had become heir. That son, Kayawasa, has been called the first Egyptologist, a high priest. He made it his life's mission to uncover and restore artifacts and tombs that were ancient even in the time of Ramses, with some burials stretching back 1,000 years. However, he also occasionally stamped his father's name on artifacts to symbolically claim them, even while restoring them. In his role as priest, he also helped his father celebrate the Set Festival, a celebration that was conducted for the first time in the 30th year of a reign, then every 3 years after that. Ramses celebrated 12. He ruled for 66 years, well into his 90s, and each year he sent more and more of his beloved sons to the massive tomb he dug out in the Valley of the Kings. By the time Kayawasa died, so many of his brothers had already gone to the tomb that it was actually Ramses' 13th son, who took over as crown prince. And it was he who, when his father finally died, oversaw the funeral rites and burial. Yet Nefertari was already settled, and happened only a few years after Ramses' death. This period of infighting weakened Egypt ahead of the Bronze Age collapse, which sent the whole region into decline. Were it not for a strong pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, Ramses following his distant ancestors' great name, Egypt might have collapsed entirely. But even so, Ramses' legacy was significant. Having shaped Egypt so far, it was inevitable that later generations would note him as a great ruler. A huge bust of his head remains a central attraction of the museum. Abu Simbel is one of Egypt's most famous sites, and is constantly inspired to show its name home of Mendes, reflecting on the passing nature of power. It's no wonder that in 2021, when the Egyptian government moved 22 pharaohs from the Egyptian Museum to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, in capsules decorated like traditional funeral clothes, the mummy of Ramses the Great attracted extra attention from the press and audience, and preceded by actual chariots. The victor of Kadesh, the great builder of Egypt, once again made a procession to his honored resting place. Now that is a lasting legacy. But maybe you think you could do better, right? Well, if so, you can now put your money where your mouth is by forging your legacy as the next ruler of Bronze Age Egypt in the epic new game, Total War Pharaoh, who we totally thank for making this episode possible. Total War Pharaoh is just the ultimate Bronze Age strategy game where you can not only explore ancient Egypt during its last golden age, rendered in just incredible historical detail, mind you, but where you can also forge your own path and try to stand against the Bronze Age opponents. The single-player sandbox campaign is just absolutely massive and allows you to take control of 8 different faction leaders spanning a variety of rich cultures of the period, but that also offer their own unique playstyles. For instance, you could become a fierce warrior or brilliant tactician and then lead massive armies into epic real-time battles, or you could use grand strategy to conquer and manage an ever-evolving economy and boost your own political standing in the courts to defend the rich lands of Egypt, Canaan, and Anatolia. But really, one of my absolute favorite tactical elements in this game is that you have to be prepared for unexpected things like intense changes in weather that can directly impact your or your enemies' chances of survival on the battlefield, and utilize their dynamic fire systems and spread destruction to forests and settlements. Seriously, there's just a ton of play here, and it's just super fun to strategize how to use it all to your advantage. So, if you would like to join me in proving that you have what it takes to become the greatest pharaoh in history and forge an empire of the ages, just leave that link below for your favorite digital marketer of choice and snag yourself a copy of Total War Pharaoh. And if you do, maybe I'll see you on the battlefield. Well, look at these comments here on Turk, Angelo Valenciana, Arcolite Games, Casey Muster, Dominic Valenciana, Izzy Coin, Joseph Lane, Julia Coin, and Skylar Holmes. Thanks for being legendary patrons, y'all.
Lay your weapons down and walk away.
Chamonix, France, 60. The College Orphanage Asylum, New York City, July 13, 1863. 233 black children between the ages of 5 and 16, who only moments ago had been in classrooms, are now gathered in a single open space. Many of them are frightened and crying. They can hear the angry, racist mob outside, shouting obscenities as they brawl with the policemen shooting the building. The glowing torches light up the windows. Guided by caregivers, these children make their way to a back exit, but the building is surrounded and escape is not guaranteed. As they cut through the dining room, one of the girls cries out, "The Bible! We forgot the Bible!" A matron turns around. Finding her voice, she reaches for the child. "Come along, sweetie. You can bring the Bible, but we must go now, okay?" That Bible will be one of the only objects from this orphanage to survive the night. For New York is burning, and tomorrow this building will be nothing but a charred husk. Thanks so much to Factor for keeping us history-loving beings well
Life so
White in there.
I actually played Thunderfoot. I feel bad. It was way better than Stick and Lock.
Okay, how do I do that? Like, where do I start?
In middle school era. like, huh, we ain't the board here. I don't really want to play with this stupid outside. All suck. No equipment. Everyone here is really mad because it's hot outside. We were very, very smart in middle school. We go up to the principal and, hey man, what other games do you play? And he was like, you can always go to kickball. I was like, we have a gymnasium you guys can use. Oh, gym. Use that during recess. Ask them to order us badminton equipment. 30 minutes later, Amazon Prime same-day delivery equals goals. So we get badminton equipment, right? This is part of a huge industry because it's a new sport no one's ever seen before.
I was
class. No basically, we don't have equipment. Everyone's really excited. And then we realize that you can't without a net. So we don't have any nets to play badminton. We would walk around playing it. It's kind of like everyone's still very was like, you know what? I think they deserve it. So they ordered volleyball nets. And so we used to play badminton with these volleyball nets. And every single time I was up to go, I was the best kid in school. As you know, we get our equipment and we start playing with the volleyball net. We actually start having tournaments in our school.
just hitting people instead. Not even hitting the shuttlecock, he's just beating up people at this point.
My coach is like, oh man, you're really good. We're gonna put you up against the best player we have. He was challenger, dude. It's a very, very, very close game. Each serve is done with insane precision and speed. I have to run around the entire court. It finally gets down to the last point. He slips and he falls, hurts himself. I'm basically sitting there and I'm kind of sad because he is my teammate, but I am also trying to beat him, so I can't show any remorse.
So you broke his knees.
I broke his knees.
You stole his liver.
The win!
He's here to win!
And after his little scuffle of him, hurting himself and him basically resigning, we shook hands. But then later on, I went over, they gave me very nice food.
So the moral of the story.
I'm to sign up.
The point of all that. You gotta make sure the gymnasium floor is freshly waxed so that your opponent slips and falls and breaks their neck so you can win the game.
Didn't you used to play soccer? Oof.
Yeah, so actually that was another sport I played.
You got a better sport, maybe, God?
No. I want to roast soccer, or football, as they call it. That's what they call it, right? Okay, for half of the time in soccer, it's just a ball being kicked from one place to the other. Like, imagine being a commentator for a soccer game. Oh, here's Neymar kicking the ball for the 80th time, like he's been kicking for the entire game. Oh, here comes LeBron, intercepts for the 96th time.
LeBron,
it's
that's
been 85 minutes, and not a single goal has been scored yet. 0-0, like Sox's body count. Looks like we're gonna go into halftime. Let's go back to you, Jim. Channel 5 News. What civilization would look like if Nat wasn't adopted?
How do I even hear?
That's crazy.
Imagine spending an hour of your life to not see a single goal being scored, and then going on Twitter like, guys, that was.
Come to Mathis Home today and save during our presidential savings event with markdowns in every department. We've got all the latest looks for every room in your house. Incredible savings. We've got it all. For great quality, all the latest styles and best value, come to the presidential savings event at Mathis Home.
So I went to my family doctor, and he said, "Oh, you got the ear." Just very matter of fact. And then Ben got decided worse. So I went to see the urologist, and he discussed different options, mainly just Xiaflex and surgery. Those are two main treatments.
There it is.
So what are you thinking about now? Are you thinking of going ahead with treatments?
I definitely see the positives, and I'm definitely leaning more towards speaking to my doctor about it. Part of the reason why I haven't done it is because I'm scared of
He's afraid of that surgery. I think it's less invasive than surgery.
My urologist, he's somebody I can talk to about the issue. And reassure me that there's nothing wrong with me, and that there's ways to get it better if I want to. My wife is almost more concerned about my well-being and impact your life in different ways. don't feel hope. That's why I'm struggling.
You talk to your urologist. Check it out.
Collagenase Clostridium histolyticum, or any of the ingredients of Xiaflex, or to any other collagenase product. See the end of the medication guide for a complete list of ingredients in Xiaflex. Xiaflex can cause serious side effects, including penile fracture, corporal rupture, or other serious injury to the penis. Receiving an injection of Xiaflex may cause damage to the tubes in the penis, called the corpora. After treatment with Xiaflex, one of these tubes may break during an erection. This is called a corporal rupture or penile fracture. This could require surgery to fix the damaged area. Damage to the penis might not get better after a corporal rupture. After treatment with Xiaflex, blood vessels in your penis may also break, causing blood under the skin, hematoma. This could require a procedure to drain the blood flow into the skin. If a hematoma appears, skin and soft tissue necrosis, death of skin cells, may develop in that area, which may require surgery. Symptoms of corporal rupture or other serious injury to your penis may include a popping sound or sensation in an erect penis, sudden loss of the ability to maintain an erection, pain in your penis, purple bruising and swelling of your penis, difficulty urinating, or blood in the urine. Call your healthcare provider right away if you have any of the symptoms of corporal rupture or serious injury to the penis listed above. Do not have sex or any other sexual activity between the first and second injections of a treatment cycle. Do not have sex or have any other sexual activity for at least 4 weeks after the second injection of a treatment cycle with Xiaflex and after any pain and swelling has gone away. Xiaflex for the treatment of Crohn's disease is only available through a restricted program called the Xiaflex First Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy, hypersensitivity reactions, including anaphylaxis. Severe allergic reactions can happen in people who receive Xiaflex because it contains foreign proteins. Call your healthcare provider right away if you have any of these symptoms of an allergic reaction after an injection of Xiaflex. Hives, swollen face, breathing trouble, chest pain, low blood pressure, dizziness, or fainting. Back pain reactions. After receiving an injection of Xiaflex for Peyronie's disease, you may suddenly feel back pain, including
Was the most intense soccer match I've ever seen!
He was the one person not chosen on the team.
Yeah, and soccer isn't even inclusive. Like, what if we don't have legs?
What? You want me to tell you about the real basketball? Brushing his teeth like dude, that's really hard on the wrist.
Juicy brushes his teeth.
Oh my god. My favorite sport is chess. You can't say your favorite sport is chess, you suck at it! What are you talking about? What's that exclusive? I have this on camera, bro. I have this on footage. I'm putting it here. Everyone sees this. I'm talking about real football. When I was 12 years old, right, I was playing football with my cousin. We were playing in a little football court ground. I planted the football on the concrete ground, right? My cousin is in goal, preparing with his massive gloves, and I stepped back and I took a huge run up, right? And I'm speeding towards the football advancing, and I get to the ball. I boot it after that. What does that mean? I booted the ball with full force and literally hurdled up over the goal and over the net. I completely missed, right? But what I need to mention is that we were next to a kid's playground. Children. As the ball was up in the air, it comes storming back down. There was a dad and his kid. So this dad was looking on the side at his child coming down the card slide, right? And this certain man had a cap on his head, right? And the ball comes launching towards his head and it literally slams on top of his head. And the guy literally jumps up and he freaks out and he checks left and right and he's like questioning life where it happened. He had no idea. The ball came and smacked him.
Every child has unique needs. That's why Royal King has 63 smartphones tailored to me. And with PetSmart, $10 in savings and 60 on your dog food.
my life. Whoosh. And then it goes like, over here, there's a 90-degree corner that goes over there. So what you have to do, all the way over here, go here. Your dad is jump in the down like this. Fall down a I was until the day came, the day of the rescue. I wanted you to jump. I looked up at the giant door and went up. I don't know what that is. Alright, I'll go check it out. It's back Tokyo Dip. My dad was there as well. He filmed everything. He got some camera actually. And I took that corner and everything was perfect. Everyone was looking, everyone started clapping, and I was like, yeah, I got this. I was the first one to do that jump that day. Everyone was like, that's how I lost my virginity.
That all women love. I wanted to go play I was a little scared, but we went to in the ghetto because why not?
Basketball play in the ghetto. Go!
I was proud of it. I was proud of it. I would be LeBron.
You played basketball and you're fucking tall!
This is the time I'm going to do this. I the ball.
You can't even freaking hop 3 centimeters!
I want to see you walk a mile.
If I walk a mile, the world would collapse. Okay, I'm doing you a favor.
I need to calm down. We need to also lose the I'm saying. Anyway, I decided in my brain today was the day I'm going to do that. That was totally different. And I'm going to send the ball in and go. And he preparing and then anything. Your retry in my soul. I'm running at and I suck. I'm in the air like this. Okay. Oh my god. Literally right there.
Incredible.
I realized the I did I'm like, oh my god.
Jam his feet. And then he's gonna wrench to underwater.
I let go of the ball and then I'm trying I hang on to the ball, right? And I'm
ball go? Did it go in or?
I don't remember. I literally acted like realizing that I'm going to die. I just threw the ball away.
When did this happen? What age did this happen?
Like 2-3 years.
Oh my god. This was a recent event.
On a positive note, we can animate the ball going in.
Yes! Congratulations!
Oh my god. Explosion, go. If you guys enjoy that, let me know what your favorite sport is down below. And make sure to go subscribe to all my friends' channels. All the links are down below.
Makes match more happy with game.
Today, we're going to be telling more embarrassing childhood stories, so let me pick a name out of the hat. Completely random, Plaza B.
You have a hat?
I have a hat.
Okay, so I was a kid, right?
No way.
Like 7 years.
Shocking.
And me and my friends, he had a birthday party. After the party, we went out on our little bicycles and we rode down the streets.
No helmet, no bike, no people.
They were like normal bikes, and I was like on a little mountain bike, so I could go really fast and do wheelies and stuff. And we came across this house, like big house, a really big court and a long driveway to like this big house. And we were like, oh my god, we're gonna pull on the bell and then we're gonna drive off because funny.
You were gonna bell and dash?
That's what it's called. We are gonna go bell and dash.
But I don't know if that. I don't think that's what it's called.
So we did that. Back. We did it again.
No one was home.
The owner's a jet.
But there's a car right there. You know what? We do it one more time. You ring the bell. We wait like 20 seconds, and all of a sudden there's a car coming. We're like, why is there a car coming? What is that? And it was coming faster and faster. And we were like, oh, please get out. So we started traveling this slowly, and then the car came out of the driveway and then turned our way. And we were like, oh heck no. And I was paddling, I was puffing. Even my friends are really slow, because I was on the mountain really fast. I was ahead. Wow. And the car just drove past, and he was coming for me. And I was like, oh god. And all of a sudden, like really close to me. It cuts me up, and he jumped out of the car, and I'm like, okay, I'm dead.
You're dead.
I was so scared, I hit my pants. Like this, yo.
We are now putting another name of the hat. Plaza, I have to rate that 7 out of
10.
everywhere she goes. Okay, I'll the mama's fine. Bad habit. My mom seeing get lost into the I was like, go to the hide in the something like that. Basically, after her mom, and if I got kidnapped, so be it. It was part of the price. I would have won because my mom would never have found me, right? But one day, okay, my mom decided to fight. We went to the mall, right? And I was like, oh my god, the mall is closing. I can hide so well. That's my TV baby voice, okay? So I was hiding amongst all I'm about to piss my pants. I'm about to dookie my shorts. Okay, everything is going wrong. So this grandma's like, okay, it's fine. I'll go help you find your mom. I'm bawling in tears. My mom's watching in the corner, laughing. This goes on for like an hour of me just crying. An hour? Holding this grandma's hand, just walking around the entire mall trying to find my mom. And my mom's
burning out of chairs.
Yeah, I'm bursting out of like I'm basically dehydrated on the floor at this point, right? Like that's how much tears I've shed losing my mom, right? And then my mom comes in an hour later. It's like, oh, this is my son, by the way. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. Like that's some kind of lesson you should teach your son like in that way, right? But needless to say, I've never ran away from my mom ever since.
Don't blame me.
Lesson learned.
I'm gonna say good mom.
She gave me candy and hoped that I would shut up.
I'm gonna have to rate 5 out of 10 on the embarrassment scale.
Blaza pisses his pants and no one notices, okay? And he gets a 9 out of 10. I get lost from I'm crying in a store about to dookie my shorts, and I get a 5 out of 10?
Yeah, I'm not the one doing the rating. The next person in the hat, completely not who you think it is.
Is it finally me?
It is. Juicy.
Yes, okay, right. You guys want to hear an amazing comparison story?
I'm already embarrassed.
No, everyone leave. Everyone walks away.
Okay, so right. So when I was in school, we have like this lunch table last week. While I was in school last week, what was I doing?
Is your story about how you brushed your teeth? That's pretty amazing.
We were sitting at this lunch table when I was younger, and when it came to lunchtime, you know when like you have this canteen or cafeteria where you can grab any food or you can choose to eat anything you want, right?
Buffet.
So yeah. So buffet. So we all got our food, and before you guys saying it wasn't just beans on toast with cheese on top or fish head pie. Okay, we were like eating at this table, and it stank of fish, right? We had no idea. Okay, yeah. This is the thing, TBH. Okay, so.
it was like the hardest moment ever. Like just saying here was like I was having like a mini heart attack. That's how bad it was. Okay?
That's like awful.
It was awful. All right. That being said, I really needed to go pee. All right, in the computer lab. You know, any normal person would go up to the teacher and ask, "Excuse me, can I use the bathroom?" And the teacher would be like, "I don't know. Can you?" And the kid would be like, "Yeah, I can," and start peeing in front of them. But no, that's not what I did.
I see where this is going, and I don't like it.
I was sitting there, and you know, the teacher was talking to some other students on the other side of the class. You know, I felt too much pressure to walk across class and ask the teacher, you know, if I could use the restroom. What happens if people were looking at me? What if they knew I used the bathroom? What would they think of me?
No way.
They couldn't. Disgusting. Disgusting. All right, my mind was racing. It came to a point. If I asked my teacher if I could use the restroom, I thought like half the world would just be nuked. Like that's how bad it was. All right. I decided I was just gonna hold it in. This was a horrible idea because the reason is I couldn't hold it. I peed right there in the chair. I was so insecure about it that I didn't move. I was still playing cool math game. All right. Everyone around us just still gaming, and I was sitting there.
Right.
No, I was just gaming and in a chair filled with piss. And I did this till the class was over and no one knew. Or at least I thought.
What?
Okay, I thought my plan was bullshit. But then I realized we all had to leave our chairs in order to go back to class. I quickly came up with a plan. Before class ended, I go up to the teacher and I told my teacher that someone peed in my chair. Nothing, alright? She just looked at me down and up. No expression, no nothing. And it got worse because she didn't say anything. The bell rang. Everyone got out and was ready to go. And I was just in the middle of the room, like looking at the teacher. Every kid got up and walked around me. Like it was the one big circle just to say, that is
So back in my peak, elementary school, you know, the peak of all peak, you know, the alpha male I was. Obviously, I received a lot of attention from women, and you know, even some men, and you know, even some teachers.
What do you mean by that?
I had a girl for a long time. We'll call her Emily.
Man, remember the daddy?
She's
elementary school.
She was in every single one of my classes, from math, science, literature, you name it. Yeah, we were in all our classes. We never really talked to each other, but it was not normal in elementary school. You know, like the boys stick with the boys and the girls stick with the girls. You know? And honestly, exactly. Honestly, I didn't know anything about her. All I knew is that she was female and I liked to put her up. I liked it. Crazy.
Hey, in fact, mine recently.
It must be mine. Look back.
We're going to be telling us spooky sex stories and how mine turned into the worst night of my life. The worst of your life is a crazy thing to say about how it ended. Oh, trending and limbo was really big, and I went all out.
You dyed your hair?
Yeah, dude. These are my fire costumes.
Wait, which one are you? Are you the Batman in the middle?
Yeah, look at those packs. Dang.
Right? That's real. That's not even the costume. That's straight real.
Why does your dad look AI generated?
The one on the left is one of my favorites. I was a vampire. I'm gonna suck your toes. That's me.
You're an emo vampire.
You look so Asian. Yeah, I could see it. I could see you as a fellow brother.
Yeah, and now Tochi's saying us, now it's okay for all of us to say it.
Yeah, you look Chinese, man.
This one year, I dressed up as Freddy Krueger. You know him, the pretty freaky guy. I've never seen the movie when I was a kid. I didn't even understand it. It was just one of the freakier masks you could buy at Party City, okay? It was like a cheap mask that like rips your face apart. You know, it's like, it's not good, right?
So,
but like,
you went for the scarier costumes, not like the funny costumes.
no, I was like the spooky costumes.
You wanted to scare people?
I wanted to scare people.
Why'd you go get a costume then?
Good one. So usually on Halloween, I don't go house to house to get candy. No. I really get into the spirits, okay? Each year, I go over to my friend's neighborhood, and the two of us, we like to scare people. As you guys know, all right, many people don't know, I am weirdly flexible, okay? And the weirdest
I figured this out last year, guys.
I actually figured this out.
Nah, bro. Is this edited?
No, that's not Photoshop. That's real.
Why does it look like you peed?
Oh, because I did.
Did you break your leg to get that photo?
No, that's that. I'm just like I said. I'm just weirdly flexible. Okay, I even have a whole website about it. Whoa, you made a website. And you can do it too with the help of Socks.digital. Build a website for anything. Your product, your YouTube channel, the 1,000 pictures of your cat, even a piece of bread. It's quick and easy. Look at all our satisfied customers.
Aren't all those people literally just you? That's like your brand, your company.
And also these people, whether you need a website made quick and easy or you want a long-term partner, our team at Socks.digital can help you. You can even get a website complete for as low as $20. So try it down below. I'm able to like wrap my entire arm around my head. I can put my body in like a sphere. Like I'm like that circus delay. Like I'm like it's weird. Circus delay. Can you take this photo? Flexible, and it's kind of weird, but at the same time, I used it to fight advantage. Look. Subscribe. So I usually like to hide behind trees while people were walking down the street, while they were trick-or-treating, okay?
You are a weird kid, bro.
The strike stare at my friends, okay? And they would just up, like, what do you do when some guy is making weird noises and a mask in front of you, right? And they didn't really know what to do. So much longer in like a very Halloween mask, giving some like sound effects, sudden spurts of screams. But this is where the two-part combo. My friend stunned the kids in the stair gap, and then I came running behind the trees, behind the group of individuals. I dislocated up my arms in the weirdest places, and then I started running, paired up with screaming. Already the kids are stunned, so I'm running behind them, wilding my hands in the weirdest things, right? They scatter everywhere. Okay. Literally a type.
Wait, so your son is used to